adoption is a serious, major trauma, no matter how good it was, no matter how early it was.
Hmm.
The longer, because it's a separation from the one that you were born in. If you study ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, like they affect health overall, just as risk factors of smoking or being very obese or having parents that had strokes or cancer. It's just the adverse childhood experiences are just as severe, and adoption is one of the most difficult ones. Even if it's at birth, even if you had a loving mother, if you had a mother that didn't want you, it's another adverse childhood experience,
Right.
right?
Okay.
Another loving birth mother. So to recognize that primary trauma from the beginning and to um, recognize that if, and this is something that was even new to me that I learned with Alex when he was going through the RID, that if a child is dysregulated because of that trauma, there's nothing right at that moment that matters other than helping them get back to being regulated.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond Empty Nest. I'm your host, Jody Silverman, speaker, mentor, and Chief Dare Officer at Moms Who Dare. Every Thursday, I'll share stories of midlife transformation, happiness tips, and dare you to see the opportunities waiting for you so that you can make this next chapter even better than the last. If you're ready to dare, I'm ready to dare with you. Let's get into today's episode. Hi, and welcome to Beyond Empty Nest and to a very special series I'm calling Month of Dad. We spend a lot of time talking about how moms navigate the empty nest and midlife chapter, but dads have their own journey too. And this month, we're giving them the mic. Each week in June, I'll be sitting down with an extraordinary dad who's experienced not just the transitions of kids leaving home, but also the midlife shift that often comes with it. We'll talk about what it's really like when your kids no longer need you in the same way, how it impacts fatherhood, marriage, career, and personal growth, and the ways these men have dared to step into this next season of life. And today, we have a special guest, Art Blanchford, husband of 30 years, father of three, including two adopted children, coach, podcast host, and endurance adventurer. After a major midlife transformation, Art now helps others navigate life transitions through his coaching, podcast, Life in Transition, and his new book, Purposeful Living Wisdom for Coming of Age in Complex Times. And in this episode, we're going to talk about moving from being a workaholic to becoming a more present and purposeful dad, the unique journey of parenting adopted children, and the two parenting rules that Art swears by, no matter what stage you're in. So let's dive in. Welcome, Art.
Hey, Jody, thank you so much for having me. I love the introduction. I love your energy. Thanks for having me here.
Yes, well, I'm excited. Before we do dive in, I have a fun fact for the audience. I was a guest a few months ago on Art's podcast, Life in Transition. It's an amazing show, and we'll be sure we're going to drop the link below in our show notes. And it's a great show packed with value for our listeners, for all listeners. So I'm giving you a dare. I'm going to give them a dare right now. My
All
dare,
right.
be sure to add Life in Transition podcast to your playlist right next to Beyond Empty Nest. So we'll be sure to link to that below because that was a fun
Awesome.
conversation.
Yes, it was. Thank you. And there's a lot of great conversations in there about midlife as a whole, but also some incredibly interesting female guests, women in midlife, and going through the challenges of beauty and menopause and a whole career and all of that stuff, right? So I have some wonderful guests that would be very interesting and useful for your audience as well.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm good. Listen to it. These are all good. We have to expand. Part of daring is expanding yourself and not just listening to the female hosts. And that was part of the reason why I wanted to turn the mic over to the four amazing dads, and you being one of them, Art, is because, you know, the moms need, I think it's important for the moms to hear the dad's perspective if they're not paying attention, listening, if they have a husband in their life or a brother who's a father. There's a man in a woman's life who is experiencing this, and men don't necessarily talk about what it is they're feeling and what they're experiencing like the women do. And
I mean,
I
not in the same way as women, for
not in the
sure.
same way. No, and
Yeah.
I think we overlook it when we talk about it. I think we're very hyper focused on the mom and the women. At least I know I am. And by being a guest on your show, I'm like, and then Jay Ramsden, who's another one, and Paul Sullivan's another one. I'm like, you know what? Doing a month of dad this June to honor the dads. So let's dive in. I think the first thing I'd like to address is because I think a lot of men feel this way, and we are men focused on this show. Right now, this episode is men focused. So don't say, yeah, same with the women, say we can do this unqualifying. That there's a I know that you like to talk about, that balance of being the workaholic and being the power executive and how to be a great dad while being the executive. So what have you discovered through your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back a little bit to my first director level job where I was really struggling because I thought, and I had one child at the time, 1 year old that we had just adopted, Alex, who's now 24. And
Right.
my dialogue in my head was, well, I can either be a good businessman or a good husband, good father. Like I can't do both, which is a false dichotomy. And a lot of times we have those false dichotomies. And with some help from Tony Robbins, UPW at the time, 25 years ago, I realized I did have a choice and I could do both really well. And in fact, they would both support each other. And it was really a big mindset shift for me to be able to do that. And one of the biggest things that I did at that point, my kids were too young to set ground rules with me, but I did with my wife. I sat down and said, okay, what would it look like? Like, what boundaries do I need to put on work in order for me to be a good and present dad as well and husband? And the main one that I stuck with for the next, I'm still sticking with it 20 years later, 25 years later, was limiting my travel to
Okay.
8 nights a month. Right. So I was traveling a lot and I traveled a lot, but even 8 nights a month is a fair amount. But that was the one that I stuck with on average through the year and almost every month. Some months are more, but then some months were less. But I limited my travel to 8 months, 8 nights a month. And that made me more present and automatically by being present, like that's a biggest part of being a father and a husband. It is really is being there. Right.
Yes.
People talk about quality time. Yeah, but the quantity is what makes the quality possible, like
Yeah.
not
Oh,
being
I
in a
like that.
rush. So that was a really big one for me is to just shift my mindset that both were possible and one supports the other. The playtime I have with my kids, the date nights I have with my wife, the adventures that I go on with my family, I actually give my mind downtime from the business as well and let it recharge and reconnect and come up with new ideas. And doing well in business also helped me financially to provide well for the family. So to realize it's not a false dichotomy. And I had a mentor at the time, Gustav Selsing, great guy, and I remember it was right in the same time frame. I just started this director job. I was only 27 years old. I was living in Germany, and I asked him. I got home on a Friday. I'd been gone all week, and my customer's calling. Hey, we need you at the plant tomorrow because we have this issue, and if you can fix it, then you're going to get all this business from one of your competitors. And I called Gustav. I'm like, I'm tired, and I just got home, and I told my wife I'm not going to be traveling this much, but my customer called, and he said, yeah, no, I've been in the same situation. He said, and I made the wrong decision and it cost me a lot of money. And I said, see, I knew it. I have to go. I didn't want to, but okay, thank you. He said, no, 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 no.
Oh,
I went and I got divorced
I knew you were
and
going to
it
go there.
cost me a lot of money. So
Yeah.
no, send somebody else. And if you don't get the business, it's okay. Send somebody in your team that hasn't been gone all week and it's all right. And I was like, wow, this was my business mentor. This was not my life mentor. This was my
Ah,
business
wow.
mentor. So really gave me a lot of encouragement. So I apologized to the customer not coming myself, sent somebody else. He still solved the problem. We still got the business and I kept married, which is really good. And that was 2000, probably 2001 or 2002. So
That's really impressive. That's really, that you had a great business mentor.
yes.
And
Yeah.
and I like so much of what you just shared in that story. There's so much can be applied to so many different areas of life to the you call it the belief systems that we adopt as to be true that you can't be a successful executive and a successful dad. And it's just wrong. And
Yeah.
it was the same dichotomy with women. You can't have it all. Well, first
Right.
of all, what does that mean? First you have to get
Exactly.
to like, what does having it all really mean?
Right.
It does. And I like how you did that. It's a shift of mindset.
Hmm.
Yeah, Tony Robbins is one to help you do that. It's a shift of mindset, reframing our beliefs and then
Yep.
challenging them. And I love the other part of it was asking you a question. So what would it look like? What would
Yeah.
it feel like? How could this possibly work? Because there's always a way
Yeah.
to rearrange things. There's
Yeah.
always a way. And those beliefs, you know, you're so, a little off topic here, but as it relates to our children and their generation, we were brought up, you work, you work, you work, you work. It was like a badge of honor if you didn't take your vacation days.
Yeah.
Badge of
Yeah.
honor. Oh, and God
Absolutely.
forbid you were sick and you needed a personal time off. I don't even know how much PTO I was able to get. I just didn't.
Right.
But our kids today, at least I'm seeing it with my kids, they're negotiating not just salary when they're sitting there interviewing for a job, they're negotiating their PTO and
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
they're
Absolutely.
taking their vacation and they want to be successful in work and they want experiences and to have a life. And, at first, I even think my husband was like, I don't understand this. What do you mean you're excited? You have a day off and all you talk about is your day off. And I said, because you weren't allowed to. We were told it wasn't.
Right.
You know what? You can be successful and take time off too.
Absolutely. And I know I worked for, it was a US, legally a US company, but it was a European headquarters. So they had a fair amount of vacation, but it was interesting. And I used it. And my wife helped me to see that early in our marriage. Even when I was still a workaholic, I always used a vacation. And there was a vacation also had a big point about getting us back home from Shanghai. So I was in Shanghai with my family. My wife was just a guest on my podcast. So check that one out with
Oh,
Art
I'd love
Blanchford
to. Yeah.
talking about the transition to Shanghai as a young mom and, so forth. But when we were coming back, loved my job over there. It was fantastic. And we were trying to decide whether to extend or not the contract. So I had a 3-year contract. We're 2.5 years in. I was going to extend for 2 more years. And business wise, it would have been great to do. And my wife was on board. I talked to my boss and said, I'm really considering extending. And this is what I need. I need 1 more week of vacation. I already had 5 weeks and I was asking for a sixth week because a lot of our vacation was spent at home here in the States, going to doctors and dentists and didn't really feel like vacation. So we wanted to have 1 more week where we could actually take a vacation
Yeah.
and was interesting. And he said, okay, but I'm not going to give it to you till next year, till the new contract, not this contract. And we had been praying for a clear signal of whether we should extend or not.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, then I'm not going to extend.
That was
And
your
he got
thing.
sort of irate, like, what do you mean you're not going to extend? Just over 1 week of vacation a year later? I was like, yes. And it's a signal that I shouldn't extend. And 2 weeks later, my wife hit the wall and decided to move home. So it was over
Yeah.
a week of vacation and going from 5 weeks to 6 weeks that got me to come home earlier and
Yeah.
still be able to be more connected to
Love
the
that.
family. So
All right.
very important to have those family times and make those memories. And that was something that my wife, I did not have an appreciation for vacation, never had one growing up, never went on a family vacation with my parents. And when we were married 5 years, which was still several years before kids, she used her salary to buy a timeshare. She said, I want to make sure we have vacations. I want to make sure our
Oh,
family is set up to have special times together at least once a year.
that's
So,
wonderful. God, I would love to meet with. I'm going to listen to that episode for sure. I'll feel like I met your wife. All right, so okay, we're going to move right into because we're talking about family and wives and family, and I want to talk about parenting because we've never really had an episode about parenting of adopted children, and there has to be nuances to that.
oh man.
I actually have a niece and nephew some nieces and nephews who are adopted. But let's dive into that, the talking about parenting of adopted children. So share the family dynamic. What is your family?
Yeah. So we have our oldest son, Alex, is adopted from Russia. And then we have a biological son who's conceived in Germany, born in Michigan, Sawyer. And we have a daughter, our youngest, Kaylee, who is adopted from China. Is 19.
Okay, okay. So Sawyer was the middle guy. He's still a world traveler. He didn't even know it.
Yes, he's
Yeah.
definitely still a world traveler. And but yeah, we have a little UN, of our family. Got a Russian, American, and a Chinese.
Okay, and where are they all now?
So Alex is living 45 minutes from me. Just moved out 3 weeks ago today. For the second time, but now he's really took everything with him and he's on his own and doing great, which is such a miracle, quite frankly, such a blessing. So he's 45 minutes from me in West Nashville. And Sawyer is a computer science student at Tennessee Tech University, where my wife and I and her parents went to undergraduate.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So third or fourth generation on her side, fourth generation. And then my daughter is the real adventure world traveler. She's in Scotland at the
Ah,
University of St. Andrews. You can see my little
is she really?
there
Wow.
on my
Yeah.
shirt there. So she's studying at the University of St. Andrews.
Wow, my husband just took a big golf trip there last year.
Yeah, a lot of everyone's like, "Oh, you golf when you're over there?" I'm like,
He did.
no, it would be a total waste of time and energy for me to try to golf on those courses. Holy cow, I've run on them, and there's no way I could golf on those courses.
Now
Wow,
I mean, you went there with the right attitude. Like, it's not bad golf. It's just Scotland golf.
super tough, super tough.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
beautiful, but super tough.
so what are the nuances of there's all blended families. I have a blended family. That I say I have half steps and wholes. Like the nuances of blending the families together. What would it be? What are some lessons that you've learned about yourself as a father in parenting and bringing together children of such diverse background?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest lesson that I learned as a father, it's not the question I was expecting, but it's a really good one. With a lot of help, when Alex has reactive attachment disorder, and or I should say had, he doesn't anymore actually, which is pretty amazing to get over that. Um, when we had him in equine therapy, they required us to do family therapy and a lot of reading about what it's like to be adopted. And out of that reading, The Anatomy of Peace is the primary book that this ranch was built on. And I got to see from a book from the same author of Anatomy of Peace, I got to see that I, in the same way that I was a workaholic at work and trying to build this perfect life, I was building my family in the image of the way I wanted my life to be. This sounds awful to say, but I bet a lot of parents do this, but they
No,
don't
I
even
I think that
recognize,
I think a lot of
right?
people are saying, well, yeah, don't we all do that?
Yeah, but it's really dangerous. So what I was doing is I was the center of my life. So I was building this picture of my life. Like I was successful at work and I had this beautiful wife and we are a great partnership. And then I have these three kids and then I'm, working with them to all be a certain way, but for the wrong reason, to fit the picture that I had of my life. Like, so in a sense, they were, you know, accessories to my life instead of me supporting them and being their own person in their own life.
I
And I'll
get
give you an
that.
example of this. Like in the Anatomy of Peace, they talk about that you either see people as human beings or objects. That's the only two ways to see people. And as soon as you see them as objects, that's the root cause of all violence. You see them as something not quite human.
Right.
And there's three possibilities for being not quite human. Like to me, they can either be irrelevant, they can be an obstacle, or they can be a vehicle. So
Okay.
I was seeing my kids as a vehicle, like they were part of something I was driving, if you will, to make my life be a certain way. And it was a soul crushing realization and very powerful. And it completely shifted the way that I parented after that. My daughter even talks about it as like, the good dad and the bad dad.
Oh,
And even the bad dad, if you looked with a video camera from the outside, you would have said, wow, Art's a great dad. Right? I
yeah.
spend a lot of time with my kids. I read to them, tell them I love them, hug them, blah, 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 blah. Provide well for them, take them on nice vacations, etc. Celebrate all kinds of stuff. But it was with the wrong heart because I was trying to do it to build my life in a certain way instead of being there 100% for them in their life. And I'll give you one example of that, of it just showing how different it is. So when Alex had his RID, and was really in the throes of things. Like I can remember one particular time where I had this really, really great Christian family over. He was 12 years old, 13 years old, and they had even younger kids, and we had younger kids, and they're over, and he starts dropping all kinds of F bombs, gets dysregulated, starts dropping all kinds of F bombs. My first thought was, oh man, how is this going to reflect on me? Like with this other family over here, and what are they going to think about me as a dad that my son's doing this?
Mhm.
Natural, wrong. Right. So after this transformation that I had, my first reaction is immediately, what's going on with Alex that he's dysregulated? And how can I help him get back to being regulated so that he can move forward with his life?
Wow.
Nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a huge difference, right, in that transformation. So I
Huge.
think that's the biggest thing that I learned in far as how I parent. I would say the other thing that's for all adoptive parents, adoption is a serious major trauma, no matter how good it was, no matter how early it was.
Hmm.
The longer, because it's a separation from the one that you were born in. If you study ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, like they affect health overall just as risk factors of smoking or being very obese or having parents that had strokes or cancer. It's just the adverse childhood experiences are just as severe, and adoption is one of the most difficult ones. Even if it's at birth, even if you had a loving mother, if you had a mother that didn't want you, it's another adverse childhood experience,
Right.
right?
Okay.
Another loving birth mother. So to recognize that primary trauma from the beginning and to um, recognize that if, and this is something that was even new to me that I learned with Alex when he was going through the RID, that if a child is dysregulated because of that trauma, there's nothing right at that moment that matters other than helping them get back to being regulated,
Hmm.
right? And Dr. Purvis, Karen Purvis out of TCU, her work around what it means to be regulated and dysregulated is really helpful to me. Heather Forbes, who wrote Help for Billy and Parenting with Love, Beyond Logic and Control, Parenting with Love, also really helped me to see what it means to be regulated, what it means to be dysregulated. And our only job when a child is dysregulated is to help them get back being regulated. It's not about are they being disrespectful to me or how they should be behaving or how is it reflecting on somebody else in the situation. And all adoptions have primary trauma, and that's going to make things more complicated.
You know what? Oh my God. I'm loving this conversation. I wish I had known about all of this, raising my children. And I'm gonna validate it. I mean, I'm listening to you say it sounds horrible that I was raising them in the vision of my life. Well, I did the same thing. I did the same thing, and I could think of instances in that with my son. And it's always obvious with the one who who pushes back in a certain way, the one who
Right,
becomes deregulated, to use that term.
right,
It's very interesting. And I also start when you were saying the only you have to get out of your head, the only objective when a child is deregulated is to get them regulated, is to
right,
be there to
right,
help them and guide them.
right.
And you know what? If you think about that, what I'm thinking about is the same, it's like anxiety. If somebody's having an anxiety episode, it doesn't matter what's going on around you. The only goal is to help
Yeah,
that person
calm down.
calm down,
Yeah.
calm that anxiety.
So you're not trying to teach, right? That's what parents do. You're
No,
not
no
trying to discipline.
teaching,
You're
not
not trying
worrying
to
about what other
teach.
people are going
You're
to
not doing
think.
anything about that.
Yeah,
You're not worried about what's going on around you, right? You're
yeah,
just how do we calm down? Of course, there's still room for teaching, but that is you can't teach if someone's dysregulated. Like Dr. Purvis's research was so interesting. Like you can't even access. You're in fight or flight. If you're dysregulated, you're in fight or flight, and fully dysregulated, fight or flight to a level where you'd kill or be killed,
yeah.
right? It's that severe. So to try to do anything other than get regulated at that point is completely useless and will backfire. Right.
And you also touched on, a very common issue in just life is worrying about what other people think, or worrying about what people are thinking and saying. And my son left college. I was never so happy. One of my happiest, most joyful moments was when he called to say, I think it's time for me to come home.
Mm,
I was never more proud of him than I could have been ever in my life. I was never so relieved and full of joy. And and I'm not going to say at first, at the thought of him leaving college, that's what you're supposed to do. How can you get a
right.
job without a piece
Right.
of paper? That piece of paper.
Right.
My husband and I had to come relearn that and say, there's something else for him. This is
Right.
not for him now. It might never be. It could be, who knows? And I never, do you know, I never once worried about what anybody thought about me not
Good for
graduating from
you.
college.
Good for you.
And what was interesting, Art, is that I would have in the first year of him being out, I've had friends who would say to me all frequently, so does he think about going back to college? Does Dan think about going back to college? I'm like, yeah, no. And finally I said, two in particular, I had to say to both of them, I know why you're asking me. They were asking
Yeah.
me because they couldn't imagine their fear.
Their fear of what if
And the
their kids
belief.
didn't go to college and how
So
could
I
they be
said,
successful if they didn't go to
yeah.
college?
And I
Yeah.
had to say to both of them, you know what? I know why you're asking. I know you love him. I know you love me, but the question's off the table. Don't ask me the question anymore. He's not going back.
Right.
Done. And he's
Right.
fine. And we're fine.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
all good. But yeah,
Yeah.
so there's so much we can learn. And you've learned so much through your experience, educated yourself as a parent. And I appreciate you sharing all that. Some really good information here. Love that. Love that.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's really useful. And you see, there's so many. and I don't know the percentages, but it's something like half of adopted kids are fairly dysfunctional as adults because it's such a primary trauma. And as parents, we don't know how to handle that, right?
No,
There's
because
so many things
you
that
think I
comes
love them.
up,
I love them. Why are they trying?
right?
I never heard anybody call it trauma.
Yeah, it's absolutely a core trauma. And yeah, so it shows up differently. Alex was this dysregulated, raging, he didn't have the understanding. He had no empathy. He was left in a crib for the first 9 months of his life, like unattended, right? Staring at the ceiling.
Yeah.
Um, Kaylee, she did it differently, but it was still, I was so thankful for what I learned with Alex so I could see it differently with Kaylee. Like her way of addressing the trauma to try to be enough and try to be safe was to be perfect,
Mhm.
right? To make straight A's and be this great
Oh,
gymnast and, to
yeah.
do all this stuff but also not healthy,
No.
right? So it looks good outside, but, then she's, hives and all this stress and,
Yeah.
and it took me, a lot of what I learned from Alex and then trying to see into her world differently and understand what's driving her and to really focus on all of my kids, just knowing that they're enough just as they are. And there's nothing that they can do, good or bad, that's going to change how much I love them or care for them or show up for them.
I love
All
that.
right.
Love that. That's all we can do. That's really what, if we can learn to do that, we've nailed it, really.
Yeah.
So with that, you say there's two rules that always work in parenting. I'm curious about that.
Yeah. I don't know that they always work and I don't know that they're rules, but people ask me like, what's my parenting advice? And I said, there's really only two things that I know for sure. I don't know that they're rules, but first one is love wins, right?
Yes.
In the long term, no matter what, and that's selfless, unconditional love wins. And the second one is I just tell parents, I said, remember, you're the adult in the room. So basically, going back to the words that we talked about earlier, means don't become dysregulated yourself,
Mm,
right? Be able to stand in the storm of your kid's dysregulation without being dysregulated yourself. And I know that's not always possible. So the times when you do become dysregulated yourself, leave before you do something that you're going to regret and apologize as soon as you're regulated again. Right? Go
yes.
spend time, even if it's through a slammed door from the kid that doesn't want to talk to you anymore.
Yep.
Apologize to him through the door and maybe sit there for a half hour,
Yeah.
until they come out. Or just they'll say after, 20 minutes, are you still there? Say, yeah, I'm still there. Well, I'm not coming out. It's okay. I'm just here. All right. But so those are the two things that I
Yeah, I
that I
don't know that
know.
they're rules. I think they're actually, what are they? They're more powerful than the word rule.
Yeah, principles, maybe.
But yeah, core
Um,
foundations
yeah,
of
people ask me,
parenting.
yeah, exactly. Love
Because
wins
love
and
always wins. And
love
I,
always wins. And it doesn't seem like it at first, right?
yeah.
But you're never going to win by being superior to your kids or putting them down or trying to teach them a lesson or any of that stuff. All right. But open your heart. Don't do it for yourself, do it for them. And over the long term, that wins always. And I see it so clearly with my older son who had so many issues. And it was so difficult for me to let go of my expectations and, very sort of basic stuff. Very difficult time we've been through. I think it's in episode like 6 of my podcast. I tell that story. Um, called From Heart. I think it's called From Heart at War to Heart at Peace in that transition. But um, it's love does win in the end if you give enough space and consistency, and it doesn't mean um, that it's acquiescence or rolling over, right? Sometimes the love is difficult because you have to love yourself also, right? And you have to make sure that you're
Yeah.
safe and you have to make sure that the rest of the family is safe, and sometimes that requires really hard decisions, but it's always done from a loving space, right?
And I also like the second one. You're the second person in 2 weeks we were talking. And I said, remember, we're always the adults in the room. We're
Yeah.
always, and you
Yeah.
said it beautifully. You said, I wrote it down, be able to stand in the storm of your kids' deregulation before you become deregulated yourself. And one
Yeah.
way to do that is you said, take pause, breathe. I said, take a beat, take a
Yeah.
beat,
Take a beat. Yeah.
walk away if you have to walk away.
And if you're becoming dysregulated, walk away,
Walk
right? So
away.
you don't do
Yeah.
something. And you can say
Yeah.
that, hey, we'll get back together when I'm okay.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they're learning that for themselves as well. Like, oh,
Absolutely.
I can disengage if it's, and that's a great I taught negotiation for a long time too in business too. It's a great negotiation tool as well. Not even like a tactic, but just like you can always call a pause and say,
Yeah,
I need a pause. We need 5. We need 10. Right. So that's really important because what comes if you don't do that is something you're always going to regret. And sometimes if you have enough of those regrets, it severs the relationship, right? You bankrupt the account.
yeah,
Um,
that's
so
true.
don't let those stack. If you
No,
do, which we all do, if you become dysregulated and yell or do something that you don't want to do, then apologize right away. Clean it up.
absolutely. Your kids won't ever know how to apologize if they don't see that you can do
That's
it.
right.
So I love
That's
that.
right.
All right. Oh, such good advice here. Love wins. You're the adult in the room. All right. I want to know because I know that you have community. You value
Hmm.
community, I should say.
Yes. Yes.
So how has community helped you and those you serve during this chapter of your life?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important for all of us to know that we're not alone. That whatever challenges we're going through, that we have people that we can share those with in our life and can be really seen by others,
Mhm.
which is requires us to be vulnerable, to be authentic. And it requires others to practice seeing without judgment as well. But to have that and like, whether it was my running buddies or my brothers that I'm super close to or cousins, we always talked about what are our challenges with the kids and what's going on and how do we do a better job as dads? How do we do a better job as businessmen? How do we do a better job as husbands? I have a Monday night men's group I've been in for 7 years now. That's exactly that. We just call it doing our work so we can show up as better men in our lives, right? So they know my story and they know the challenges that I have and support me and showing up in a better way. So I think it's, the in 12 step, you talk about being a workaholic. We said that the opposite of addiction is connection, right? So
Makes sense.
if we're deeply connected to somebody else, um, then we won't be deep in our addiction.
I love it.
Right. So it's really important to have that community and it continues to change and it evolves. And as we're empty nesters now, like I don't have the same school centered activities to get me together
Right.
with friends. Right. So it's really important, especially for dudes, especially for guys to have an excuse to get together. Like I just got a text from the Bourbon Justice League, right. Which is a bunch of guys in my neighborhood saying, hey, who's coming over Friday or Thursday at 5 o'clock and we'll sit around the fire for a minute.
I want
Right.
to be in that group. I
And
want to hang out with the dudes.
but to have that or to have people you go hiking with, but
Yeah.
for especially for men, you need an excuse to get together usually, and especially as the kids get out because we've focused a lot on our work and our kids, and a lot of times I know I did this. I used work as a community, yes, and it was some, but as my social life. Like I had my family. I did have running buddies and a couple people in scouts and church and stuff. But mostly I thought, well, I get my social life. I have all these business dinners and board meetings and all this stuff. And that's where I get my social life. But that's not a permanent community. It's not a community you can really count on. When you leave that environment, you realize the few people that you had that are really friends and the most of them are not.
True.
Right.
Very
It's
true.
transactional relationships. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's
No.
very easy, especially if you're a workaholic, to you think you're meeting your social needs through your work, but that's a dangerous, slippery slope to be on.
That was a good point to make. I like that. I like that a lot. All right. Well, we shared a lot. And Art, that's one thing when I first met you, and I met you because I was introduced to you to be a guest on your podcast. The one thing that I admired most about you was your willingness to be vulnerable. And
Mm.
it's not easy. It's not easy for women, men, children, but you have this unique ability to be real, authentic, and vulnerable. And for that, I'm so grateful that you're a part of my month of dad, because this is a great episode for the men, for the women, and maybe we have a few children listening in. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows? So thank you. So, but we don't get out of Beyond Empty Nest without a dare. So, did anything come up for you that you would like to dare our audience to do or not to do?
Yeah. Yeah. I have one and this is something I talk about more usually in a business environment when I'm consulting with businesses, but it's actually very fitting here too. And so my dare is for each of you listening this month to have a courageous conversation
Mm.
with somebody that you love, whether it's a child, whether it's a spouse, a parent. And what I mean by a courageous conversation is care more about the other person in the relationship, and I'm going to clarify this in a minute, than you do about your own comfort. So be willing to, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's somebody in your life where you say, I need to have this conversation with them. I'm building resentment because I haven't had this conversation, but it's uncomfortable. But then I'm building resentment. So then
Yeah.
have that conversation. Sit down with them sometime when they're regulated, when you're regulated. Maybe it's, over a meal or coffee or whatever. But sit down and have the conversation and use the I statements. This is what I'm feeling when this happens. This is what I feel. And this is how I feel it affects our relationship. And see where it goes. And it could be the other person could also be you. It could be that you're putting yourself down in the relationship and you still need to have that conversation with somebody else. The one that you're, need to stick up for is yourself. That could
Yeah.
also be, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's caring enough about the other person to tell them the truth, even though it's uncomfortable for you, or it's caring enough for yourself to tell somebody else the truth about what's going on. But that's my challenge, is have a courageous conversation when you're regulated in a safe space where you have plenty of time, and see how that transforms your relationship.
That is one that has to be. I have what, 100 by this episode, like 106, 100 and whatever episodes. This is my most favorite dare.
Mm.
This one here. This one is. And it's hitting home at a time where there's a courageous conversation that needs to happen between two family members. And I'm literally going to edit this dare out and send that little snippet to the one person I know needs to hear it. So I love
Nice.
that. Love
Nice.
it.
Oh, that's
Thank you for
awesome.
that. Thank you. Thank you, Art, for being part of the month of Dad. I'm so excited about this month. It's fun. It's needed. I love that the dads showed up and we're giving you a voice, because you're just, you have the midlife stuff. We all have stuff. You have midlife
Yeah.
stuff, dad stuff, you have parenting stuff. So for everybody listening out there, what was your takeaway or takeaways? Oh my God, go back and listen, because there were so many good takeaways and lessons that we can take and learn. And actually, there's so much that Art said that I would even say, forget lessons, but that can allow you to sit back and, courageously look at how you're parenting, how you're living your life, how you're valuing your relationships, and get clear on some things and how you want to move forward. So what was it that was said today that was like your aha moment, or like it unveiled some clarity for you around something that's working or maybe that's not working? Let me know. Let Art know. You can click the link at the top of our show notes and send me a fan mail. I don't know who you are when you do that, and I can't reply. Or you can really be courageous and leave us a review or send me an email. Whatever you do, I will let Art know. How to connect with Art is in my show notes below. We'll link everything there that you need to connect with him, his podcast, the episode I was on. And then don't forget to tune in next week when I host another amazing dad for a month of dad. And as I always say, everybody, dare on. Hey guys, thank you for listening and for daring with me on this midlife journey. If you liked what you've heard, and I really hope you did, give Beyond Empty Nest a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And be sure to tell your friends to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. Until next week, dare on.